The twin suns of GalacticPrime glowed across the silver domes of the royal city. The grand palace stood in the heart of the capital, its towers piercing the clouds like spears of light. The world had known. Decades of silence after the long wars between the Ellerin Empire and the humans of Earth. Now, for the first time in history, a human delegation had been invited to the Queen's court. Queen Seraphine of Velra stood before the mirror in her private chamber. Her long, violet hair shimmered like glass threads in the morning sun, and her eyes, golden and bright, carried the calm of authority. But deep inside, behind her regal mask, there was unease. The humans were coming. Her advisors had warned her to be cautious. Her generals had demanded that she deny entry to the DEATHWORLDers, as they called them. But Seraphine was different. She believed that strength did not always mean cruelty, and deep within her heart, there was a strange, almost haunting curiosity whenever she heard the name human. The announcement echoed through the hall. Envoy from Earth's Alliance. Led by Captain Elias Ward, requests audience. The Queen straightened her crown, composed herself, and walked toward the grand throne hall. The massive golden doors opened, and the smell of polished crystal and incense filled the air. The alien courtiers bowed as she entered, her steps soft but commanding. At the far end, 5 humans stood. They were tall, dressed in light armor and formal coats. Their eyes were sharp but calm. Yet one among them stood out. He was not decorated with medals like the others. His uniform was old, slightly worn. His hair had streaks of gray at the temples. His expression was steady, neither proud nor afraid. Captain Elias Ward. When their eyes met, something inside Seraphine jolted like a flash of lightning through her heart. Her breath caught. For the smallest second, her royal composure wavered. The man bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice was low and steady, the kind that carried both respect and quiet courage. "Welcome to GalacticPrime," she replied, forcing a calm smile. "You have traveled far. Come in peace," Elias said, "to build a bridge that our ancestors could never cross." The courtiers whispered behind her throne. Some sneered, some glared, but Seraphine barely heard them. Her eyes stayed fixed on Elias Ward. She didn't understand why her hands trembled behind the folds of her royal gown. There was something in his face, something buried deep in her memory. A feeling, a shadow, a voice from long ago. As the diplomatic talks began, Elias spoke clearly, explaining the purpose of their visit: a trade alliance, a research exchange, and a promise of cooperation in defense. But to Seraphine, his words faded like background noise. Her mind drifted back years ago to smoke, chaos, and fire. She was only 6 then. Velra was burning. Her family had been trapped in the capital during the planetary war. The Ellerin and human fleets had clashed in orbit, raining debris and plasma down upon the surface. She remembered the screaming, the collapsing towers, and the fire that devoured the sky. She had been running through the ruins, calling for her mother, her small hands covered in ash. And then someone had lifted her up. A voice had said, "Hold on, kid. I've got you." Through tears, she had seen a human soldier, his armor cracked, his face bloody, but his eyes kind. He carried her across the flaming wreckage, shielding her from falling debris. She remembered gripping his uniform, the smell of smoke, and the soft hum of his heartbeat as he ran through the chaos. He had taken her to a transport ship before the final bombardment. When he set her down, he had smiled weakly and said, "You'll be okay now. Don't look back." She had never seen him again. The war ended soon after, and that memory had faded like a dream. But now, as she looked at Elias Ward, her heart whispered the impossible at him when the meeting ended. Seraphine dismissed her court with a graceful wave. The humans were escorted to their guest quarters. But before leaving, Elias glanced back at her. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, there was a quiet recognition in his expression. Though he couldn't place it, that night, the palace was silent, except for the hum of energy conduits and distant winds. But Seraphine couldn't sleep. Her heart was restless. She walked alone through the marble corridors, until she reached the royal archives, a hidden place that held every recorded memory of the war. The room was dim, filled with floating holographic crystals. She searched through the data, her golden eyes scanning old battle reports, refugee lists, and rescue records. And then she found it. Mission Havenfall Human Evacuation OPER. Her fingers trembled as she opened the file. It displayed a video clip, a young human soldier carrying a small alien child through fire and smoke. His face was younger, but unmistakable. His voice echoed from the recording, "Hang on, little one. You're safe now." Her vision blurred. Her throat tightened. That soldier had been Cadet Elias Ward. 25 years ago, she collapsed into the chair, covering her mouth as tears slid down her face. She had thought humans were only stories of brutality and destruction, but he had risked everything to save her, and now he was standing in her court as an envoy. She spent the night staring at the flickering light of that hologram. At dawn, she made a decision. When the morning came, she sent a personal summons to Captain Ward. The guards brought him to a private chamber, where the Queen stood alone, wearing a simple robe instead of her royal armor. Elias bowed politely. "Your Majesty, you asked for me?" "Yes," she said quietly. Her voice trembled slightly. "I need to speak with you alone." He nodded. Of course. There was silence between them, the kind that held too many unspoken things. Seraphine finally stepped closer. "Do you remember the war? The evacuation on Velra? The children you rescued?" Elias blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, I remember. It was chaos. Many didn't make it," he sighed, looking down. "There was one little girl I carried out of the ruins. She couldn't stop crying. I never even learned her name." Her golden eyes shimmered with tears. "That girl was me." Elias froze. For a long moment, he couldn't move or speak. The realization struck him like thunder. He stared at her not as a queen, not as an alien, but as the small child he once saved from the flames. "You," he whispered. "You survived." She nodded. "Because of you." The air between them grew heavy with emotion. Seraphine's hands shook as she looked at him. "I searched the archives last night. I saw the recording. I remembered your voice." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "That was a long time ago. I was just doing what anyone should have done." "No," she said softly. "Not everyone would have done that. Not when it was the enemy's child." He smiled faintly. "Maybe back then, I didn't care who was enemy or ally. I just saw someone who needed help." Her eyes glistened. "I owe you my life." Elias shook his head. "You owe me nothing. You've built a world, a people. You don't need to remember an old soldier." But she couldn't forget. The image of him carrying her through fire had been carved into her heart. She had lived years believing humans were dangerous, yet her very existence was proof that they could be something else, something kind. When he turned to leave, she said, "Wait." He stopped. She took a deep breath. "If they find out you're the one who saved me, my council will see it as weakness. They already distrust you. Promise me you won't speak of this to anyone." Elias nodded slowly. "You have my word." "Thank you," she whispered. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, quietly, she said, "You carried me through fire once. Now I will protect you through storm." He looked at her, surprised. "That sounds like a promise, Your Majesty." "It is," she said. "Call me Seraphine when we are alone." His lips curved into a small, warm smile. "Then call me Elias." For the first time in years, she smiled genuinely. But outside the chamber, beyond the safety of the walls, there were those who watched and waited. Generals who hated the thought of peace. Spies who whispered that the Queen had grown too close to the humans. As the suns of Velra set, painting the sky gold and crimson, Seraphine looked out from her balcony. Her heart heavy with both fear and hope. She had found the human who saved her life. But now, that same human might be the one in danger because of her. For the first time in her reign, the alien queen felt something she had not felt in years. A tremor of warmth deep inside her chest. It wasn't weakness. It was gratitude. It was something close to faith. And as night fell, she whispered to herself, "The human who saved me has returned, and I will not lose him again." Far across the city, Elias stood on the terrace of his quarters, looking at the alien stars. He didn't know why the Queen's eyes haunted him, why her voice stirred something long buried in his heart. He only knew one thing. Something told him that his story with her was not over, not yet. For 3 days after their secret meeting, Queen Seraphine could not rest. Every corridor of the palace felt colder, every whisper heavier. The council demanded faster progress on the treaty with Earth, yet behind their polite faces she saw suspicion. Some of her generals had fought in the old wars. They had lost brothers to human weapons, and their hatred had never faded. At the same time, Elias Ward noticed the tension in every room he entered. Guards avoided his gaze. Messages stopped arriving. One night his communicator was taken apart by routine security inspection. He'd been a soldier too long not to recognize the signs someone was planning something. But neither of them spoke openly. Because in the grand hall of politics, silence was safety. The shadow before the ceremony, the day of the Alliance ceremony, was approaching. The hall was being decorated with banners from both worlds, blue for Earth, silver for Velra. The air smelled of polished metal and flower oil from the palace gardens. Everyone pretended peace had already been won. Only 2 people knew the truth. That peace was hanging by a thread. That evening, while the suns were setting behind the crystal towers, Seraphine stood at her balcony, watching the light fade over the city. The horizon glowed red and gold, the same colors she remembered from that night of fire long ago. A soft knock came at her chamber door. "Enter," she said. Elias Ward stepped inside, his expression calm but serious. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "we have a problem." She looked at him sharply. "What kind of problem?" He placed a small data tablet on the table. "Intercepted messages. Someone in your palace sent coordinates of my quarters to a private militia group. If they move during the ceremony, there will be blood." Seraphine's heart sank. "I can't prove names yet," he said, "but they have weapons smuggled inside the palace service corridors." For a moment, she closed her eyes. Her people plotting murder under her own roof. "You should leave before morning," she whispered. He shook his head. "If I run, they'll claim guilt, and it will kill any chance of peace." "You're a fool," she said softly. "Maybe," he replied. "But 25 years ago, I didn't leave a child behind. And I'm not leaving now either." Her eyes glistened. She turned away, pretending to study the sunset so he would not see the tears forming. "You risk too much for a queen who can't even protect her own halls." He smiled faintly. "You protected your world. That's more than most." The ceremony began under bright banners and soft music. Nobles and diplomats filled the grand hall. Every step echoed across the crystal floor. Cameras floated above to broadcast history across both galaxies. Seraphine entered in royal armor instead of a Ghana, silent warning that peace did not mean weakness. Elias stood beside her at the ceremonial table, ready to sign the treaty. But in the shadows of the upper balcony, 3 cloaked figures moved like ghosts. The first explosion came from a vent behind the musicians. Screams filled the hall. Glass shattered. Smoke rolled across the marble floor. Seraphine's instincts took over. "Guards, evacuate the civilians," she shouted. Elias pulled her behind a column as plasma bolts struck the stage. "They're aiming for you," he shouted. "No," she said, eyes wide. "They're aiming for you." She drew a short crystal blade from her belt. Its edge shimmered like light trapped in ice. More explosions followed. The rebels, her own soldiers turned traitors, rushed from hidden doors. Wearing black armor marked with the old war symbol of Ellerin purity, death to the humans. One shouted before he could fire again. Seraphine's blade flashed through the smoke, cutting his weapon in half. She fought with fierce precision, every move flowing like fire and wind. Elias stuck behind overturned chairs, grabbed a dropped plasma pistol, and returned fire with military calm. He was older now, slower perhaps, but every shot counted. The hall became a storm of sound screams, sparks, and the echo of gunfire against glass escaped through the corridors. "Follow me," Seraphine ordered. Together, they ran through a side passage that led to the inner palace. The sound of pursuit echoed behind them. The rebels knew the layout better than any outsider. "Where are we going?" Elias asked. "To the energy core chamber," she said. "It's the safest place, and the most dangerous if they reach it." As they ran, Elias noticed the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't just a queen now. She was a soldier trying to protect more than herself. They reached a lift tube. She pressed her hand to the control pad, and the transparent walls carried them down through layers of glowing machinery. Halfway down, the tube shook violently. "They've overridden the controls," Elias shouted. Seraphine slammed her palm against the emergency release. The tube stopped between levels. "Manual route," she said. They climbed out into a maintenance tunnel, filled with blue light from energy conduits. The hum of the planetary core pulsed beneath their feet. The confession in the dark, they paused to catch their breath. The tunnel air smelled of ozone and metal dust. Seraphine leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling. "You should not have stayed," she said. "You should have escaped." Elias smiled faintly. "And let history write that the human envoy abandoned the queen? That's not how I was raised." She shook her head. "You don't understand. To save you once was fate. To lose you now would destroy me." He looked at her with surprise. Her golden eyes shimmered like stars reflected in water. "I never forgot you," she whispered. "That night in the fire? I thought of you every time I looked at the sky. I wondered if you were alive. I wondered if I'd ever thank you." Elias's voice softened. "You just did." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The roar of the energy conduits faded to silence. Only their breathing remained. Then, from the far end of the tunnel, came the sound of footsteps. "Go," Seraphine commanded. They sprinted toward the core chamber as plasma bolts lit up the darkness behind them. The heart of Valretha's core chamber was a circular hall of pure crystal, its walls glowing with streams of blue energy. At its center stood the planetary stabilizer, a column of light that powered the city. Seraphine ran to the control panel. "They've planted a detonation crystal," she said, scanning the readings. "If it goes off, it will tear half the capital apart." "Can it be disarmed?" Elias asked. "Maybe," she said, typing rapidly. "But the energy levels are unstable." The door burst open. Rebel soldiers poured in. Elias took cover behind a console and returned fire. Sparks flew around him. "Hurry up, Your Majesty." "Almost," she shouted. A plasma bolt struck the panel beside her, blowing her backward. The screen went dark. Elias ran to her side. "Seraphine." "I'm fine," she gasped, pushing herself up. "But the core is overloading. We can't stop it now. We have to eject the crystal manually." She pointed to the containment shaft, a narrow bridge over the glowing energy pit. "I'll go," Leah said immediately. "You can't," she protested. "The radiation will," he cut her off with a steady look. "You once told me I carried you through fire. Maybe it's my turn again." Before she could stop him, he ran onto the bridge. The light burned bright against his uniform. The detonation crystal pulsed at the far end. Humming like a heart about to explode, Elias reached it, pulled the crystal from its housing, and threw it into the containment pit. A wave of energy erupted, tossing him backward. "Elias!" Seraphine screamed. She rushed onto the bridge as the shockwave faded. He lay motionless, his uniform scorched. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Stay with me," she whispered, lifting his head gently. "Please." He opened his eyes weakly. "Told you I wouldn't leave." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You saved me again," he smiled faintly. "Guess it's a habit." The dawn after fire hours later, the rebellion was over. Loyal guards had retaken the palace. The injured were carried out under the pale morning light. Seraphine stood before the people of Velra, her armor scorched, but her voice steady. "Many of you saw what happened," she said to the crowd gathered in the courtyard. "Some among us tried to destroy peace because they feared the past. But today a human stood beside your queen and saved this world." She turned toward Elias, who was standing with the help of a medic. His face was pale, but his eyes were alive. She continued, 25 years ago, when I was a child, A human soldier carried me through fire. That soldier is the man you see before you. He risked his life for an alien child he did not know. And today, he has done it again for all of us." Gasps spread through the crowd, then silence. Then, slowly, the first sound of applause. It grew louder until the whole courtyard thundered with it. Even the generals, who had doubted her, bowed their heads. Seraphine stepped down from the dais and stood before Elias. The suns rose behind them, bathing the palace in gold. She placed a small silver crest on his chest, the mark of royal honor. "For saving me twice," she said softly, "and for showing my people what humanity truly means." He bowed. "It was never about power, Your Majesty. It was about doing what's right." She smiled. "Then you've taught us the greatest lesson of all." As the anthem of Velra and Earth played together for the first time, Seraphine looked up at the sky. The smoke had cleared. The same sky that once burned with war now shimmered with hope. She turned to Elias, her voice barely above a whisper. "The child you saved became queen. But the queen you saved today became human in heart." He smiled, tired but peaceful. "And that's all I ever hoped for." Together they stood at the palace balcony, watching the two suns rise higher. The light touched their faces, the same light that once marked destruction, now painting.